Hi, this is David Ross, and I'm here to showcase my entry for the Nucamp Honor Graduate Program for the Full Stack Bootcamp. The goal of this project, in other words, the MVP, was to create a website that provides news updates from various sources, is user customizable, and is searchable, meaning users can do searches for specific terms or phrases. On startup, users will be greeted with the main page, which will offer a default view and a set of news suggestions. The images and news are all provided by the News API, and in some cases, where the picture is unavailable, the website will insert a random AI-generated image in its place. These suggestions are not region locked, so they will respond to changes in the region drop-down box. In addition, users will have the option to type in a custom search term or use one of the pre-populated search recommendations below. Once a search is performed, users will be directed to the search page where they may view their results. Let me redirect your attention to the user icon dropdown at the top right corner of the navigation bar. When a user clicks this, they will have the option to log in, which will allow them to utilize a completely customized view for their homepage. Let's take a look. The user clicks Sign In, is prompted to log in using their credential, and, once successful, will be presented with their customized view. At any time, users can access their options by clicking the Options icon from the user drop-down menu and clicking the Edit Home Screen Settings. From here, users can add, delete, or move rows and columns, change the title or appearance of each block, and customize what news is fed to each block. Once saved, the changes will be reflected on their homepage. The front end was built using the React framework utilizing Redux, React Strap, React Router, and React Spring for global state management, layout, navigation, and animation respectively. Meanwhile, the backend is built on the Express framework and utilizes MongoDB and the Mongoose library for storing and retrieving the user's preferences on the cloud. Let's begin with the Redux store, since this is where everything begins. Any changes to information in the store can trigger subsequent updates in the app. It has 4 different reducers and their accompanying slices: news, settings, user, and cache. On startup, the app component renders the main components, header, footer, nav menu, and routes nested components representing the different page views. Each one of the page components is built with their respective feature components, and these with components of their own. The home page, which is the first view, will load the settings from the Redux store, and using those settings, we'll use a map function to lay out these new style components, which acts as a container for the features. The new style uses the settings to figure out what type of components to load inside of it, and passes some of the attributes to the feature components. Now the feature components themselves take these parameters such as ID and use that to access the Redux store news data specific to that component and display it to the user. Here we can see this articles palette feature using the ID prop to update a specific array item in a news slice via the fetch breaking news function. This dispatch function is actually an asynchronous thunk that will receive the search criteria from the news feature and perform the server request for information. Once the request is fulfilled, the news data is received in the form of a JSON object where it is then parsed and stored in the Redux store, which will trigger the news feature to update displaying the news. The user's custom preferences are loaded when they log in. The drop-down menu for logging in has a ternary statement that displays a different menu depending on the login status. When the user submits their information, it dispatches the attempt login thunk, which accesses the login endpoint. Once it receives validation back from the server, another dispatch is made to the fetch user settings thunk, which will try to access the user endpoint for settings. These get returned and updated in the settings slice. This will then trigger a refresh of the affected components. When a request is made to the server, it'll go to one of several endpoints. The news endpoint receives a post with the search criteria in the request body, which is parsed using the express.json middleware. The News API module then handles requesting information from the News API endpoint before returning it to the client. The login endpoint receives the user's credential and returns a JSON web token that's used to authenticate future requests. This authentication is handled by the Passport library, which also handles user creation and password hashing at the sign-up endpoint. Since a user's ID is stored on the token, this can be used to access specific information at the settings endpoint without using request parameters. Both the settings and user endpoints utilize functions in the DB Handler module to access and modify database entries. An interesting challenge to overcome was the News API's limitation on requests. Attempting too many requests within a short time resulted in a 24-hour ban on requests for a specific API key. To get around this, I needed a way to cache the data so that too many requests weren't being sent to the server every time a component updated. I decided that the client's local storage was a good way to go and gave the user the ability to clear the cache in options. Handling errors returned by Passport, MongoDB, and Mongoose also posed a challenge, since each library can return errors in various formats. This made the errors sent to the user seem very cryptic, and could make for a poor user experience if not handled independently. To overcome this, I built a custom error handling function that can take an error object, code, or string and return a more palatable message to the client. This project would not have been possible without the knowledge and support I received from Nucamp. I'd like to give thanks to all of the Nucamp staff, with special thanks to my instructors, Cesar Gomez, Tom Than, Alicia Pierce, and Chris Brush. I would also like to give thanks to Samantha Johnson, Zach Beecher, and Brian Stricker for their mentorship and support throughout the course. If you would like to view this project yourself, you can find it on github.com/davidross85 under the News Server and React News API repositories. Or you can visit davidross-web-portfolio.web.app to get more information or see upcoming and past projects.